Do it again. We had it on mute. Does everybody have their microphones on?
We now call this meeting to order.
All right, there we go. All right, well,
Do we
Thank
need
you.
to start with the pledge?
oh, sure. Yeah.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, well, thank you all for agreeing to serve on this committee. Happy to have you here tonight. Like I said, this is kind of an informal meeting. It is open to the public. We did post the meeting notice both in the lobby on Facebook and on the website. So without further ado, show you a PowerPoint that I put together here. All right, so the council, specifically the council president, Fritz Fentz, wanted us to take a look at the updating the comprehensive plan and really specifically the map for the comp plan. A lot of the policies that are in the actual plan itself that was done in 2014 are still relevant today, and the plan overall is still a good one, but we've all noticed that the map is woefully out of date. And first, I wanted to just take a step back and explain what the difference is between the comprehensive plan map and the zoning map, because they're two very different things. They may look similar, but they're different. The zoning map, of course, indicates what you are allowed to do with your property today. Whatever that zoning is, you're allowed to build according to that zoning district. The comprehensive plan is simply an Indiana advisory, and if somebody proposes a rezone, then under the state law, you're supposed to take a look at both the map and the text to see if that particular rezone would be a good idea or not. And both the Plan Commission and ultimately the council are still free to make whatever decision they think is in the best interest of the community. But certainly having a well thought out land use plan can definitely guide those decision-making points. So with that, here's the current map that was put together back in 2016. That was done subsequent to the original comprehensive plan that we use today from 2014. And as you can see, there's a lot of agriculture that's shown on the screen. I wasn't here at the time, so I don't know exactly what the thinking was, but I think the idea was to try to limit urban sprawl, which is always a good thing. But at the same time, with Fortville growing rather quickly, it hasn't provided a great guidepost for where we're going to put different land uses in the future, and also what types of land uses the town, both the residents and the council would like to see. And of course, since we do have new council members too, it's a good time to, revisit this map anyway to see if the policies have changed. So here's the map from 2016. And what I'd like to achieve today is, originally I kind of wanted to have a land use plan put together, but due to time, and I also didn't want to dive too far into it without some other folks weighing in on it. For today, I'd like you to comment, and we can talk about two main things. Number one is, what is the geographic area that we're going to cover? Because it can go outside of your town limits. As you can see in the original map, it was somewhat vague. So I kind of like to define that and talk about that today. And then secondly, I've got a bunch of different slides on the different land use categories that I'm proposing. Certainly that's subject to discussion as well. But I figure if we can, at least as a committee, more or less coalesce behind the boundary and the different categories, then the next step would be getting the public involved, putting some pen to paper, and actually showing these different land use categories. So I'm gonna start the slideshow here. Okay. So here's the map that I put together here on GIS. The area in red is our current town limits. It also shows McCordsville over on the left side. They're coming all the way up to County Road 400 West. So the boundary, and I'm going to walk you through it and explain the thought process, whether or not you agree with it. Certainly, I'd be curious to see what you think. But here was what we were thinking, what I was thinking is first, if we look at our west boundary, 400 West for quite a long time, maybe dating back at least 10, 12 years, has been kind of the dividing line between where Fortville would grow to and where McCordsville would grow to. And they're still operating under that understanding. And so for the western boundary, we would put it at 400 West. The other thing that I probably should have mentioned at the onset, but all of the area that's covered in within this black box is all unincorporated land. So none of it is in a city or a town. So the idea could also be that the black line could reflect our possible future town limits. Now, certainly, as you're well aware, there's a process for annexation. The vast majority of times it's done voluntarily as property develops, and there's no rush to annex any of this area, either now or even in the near future. But I think it would be helpful to know what those boundaries could potentially be, so we can start to plan for that. So going back to the boundary itself and how we came up with that. So 400 West would be on the west side. And then it goes down to 600 North, which is the southern boundary of Vernon Township. And it roughly corresponds with our sewer district. Our sewer district doesn't quite go that far down. It goes down to 650 north, but 650 isn't a complete street that goes all the way through. So it would seem to me to make more sense just to put it right on the township line. And then carried it over to State Route 9. I think there's been a lot of discussion at the county level that kind of the areas east of State Route 9, they'd like to keep that rural agricultural for a very long period of time. And basically the western half of the county west of State Route 9 is what would develop over the midterm and the long term. So also, I think in putting this boundary together, it's not intended to be a land grab. It is intended to be a way of how the town could grow sequentially outward, and what areas, frankly, culturally feel like they're part of Fortville. And it wouldn't be a stretch to have these areas in quote unquote Fortville. I think the vast majority of these areas, by the way, all carry the Fortville zip code as a start. Obviously, that's just a postal identification, but it is one start. So anyway, then we keep moving up to the northern boundary, and I proposed putting it up to the Hamilton or the Madison Hancock line. And then from there, I'd propose taking it into Madison County, going up State Route 36, basically hugging the boundaries of Ingalls, going up County Road in Madison County, and then making it to Fall Creek, and taking that line all the way down Fall Creek. A couple of reasons. First, as I mentioned, I think this area definitely in Madison County is not far at all from our Old Town area. There is a possibility that their area could grow, and It could either be annexed someday by Ingalls. It could be unincorporated Madison County. So we figured since it's at our doorstep, it could make sense to have that as part of our planning area. Mhm.
What is that?
Yeah, in terms, well, so it's yeah, so a couple of separate things is first, MCOG, our transportation planning agency that we receive federal funding through, ultimately. We are a part of their area, and we'd like to continue being in that area. I believe that'll be on the next council agenda to basically re-up that agreement. And so, you know, clearly, MCOG is based in Madison County, Anderson, and so we fall into that area. Now, the 2-mile boundary, I talked to Alex about this, and he confirmed my correct understanding is that there's a weird quirk in Indiana law that if your county is in an area plan commission, which we are with the Hancock County Area Plan Commission, then none of the municipalities are allowed to exercise zoning jurisdiction within 2 miles. They're able to do that in Hamilton County because it's an advisory plan commission at the county level. Why the state makes that distinction, no idea, but that's just the way it was set up. So, in terms of the geographic area for our plan, it doesn't need to correspond with 2 miles. And as long as it's all unincorporated territory, we're not planning on some other municipalities' city limits, then it's all advisory and it's perfectly legal according to Alex. So then the next piece is, you'll notice that I proposed taking that line actually into Hamilton County as well, over again along Fall Creek, and then along Flat Fork Creek near Vermillion. And that particular neighborhood, Vermillion, obviously is so close to Fortville. It's not in Fishers. It's in unincorporated Hamilton County. But we get phone calls probably every other day from people that they have a Fortville zip code, they have Fortville water, they think they're in Fortville. They'll actually ask and they'll say, hey, I need a fence permit. And we'll say, well, you're in unincorporated Hamilton County. You've got to contact either the city of Fishers or because they exercise planning jurisdiction, or you have to contact Hamilton County drainage at the surveyor's office. So then continuing on is we went down the line, the current Hamilton Hancock line, then went along 1,000 north to 400. So that was the thought process there. Oh, and I did carve out a little notch over here for the platted area of Eden. I figured they might want to keep their autonomy, and who knows, maybe at some point they'd become a town on their own. But so, any thoughts one way or the other on that notion? Yes. And then one other point while you're mulling it over is if the town does want to annex into Hamilton or Madison County at some point, there is a procedure to do that. It's very similar to the regular annexation procedure. The only difference is you have to get approval from those county commissioners to do that. And I know years ago we had talked to Madison County commissioners at the time. This is probably at least 5 years ago, just because we were getting some folks that were looking at development in that area, and they said, yeah, at least those individuals at the time didn't seem to have much of an issue with it. But
That's part of Fall Creek Regional.
So, any thoughts or feelings one way or the other?
Yeah, I just,
And go ahead.
sorry, I think, like kind of defining where our limits are. I don't know. I know when I'm thinking, if I were thinking about moving, I would be looking at documents like this. If I wanted to live in a rural area, I would be like, well, do we want to live in an area that is planned to potentially be developed as part of a town? And I might choose elsewhere if of course, do we anticipate a lot of pushback from some of those people that do live out there right now in their rural area that, we're not forcing them to annex right now, but do we foresee some of that?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think what'll be critically important is to explain the difference, but again, between zoning and the comprehensive plan, and that this is not, we're not saying that we're gonna come through an annex. I think that'll be really important to communicate to the public multiple times, so it's not construed that way. That is coupled with our policy in the written text that does talk about sequential development moving outward. So the idea is that we would, through the extension of water and sewer lines and annexation rules, we would try to avoid leapfrogging around that area. But I think it does, for better or worse, also communicate to landowners in that area that in the future, and we don't know how long I think it could take 50 years, if not longer, to build out this area, if that was desired. But to at least say, here's what our boundaries would be. And there's a possibility that at some point in time, this would be developed.
One thing I can say is the only
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because it just, the idea behind this plan is like if you were to design the whole community, what you foresee being in there at some point when it develops, what do you think is the best use for this area of property? And unfortunately, I think the one we've got now, they kind of stop short.
Yeah, I think it's time because a lot of times when, we are going against this map, especially when things are wanting to be annexed, and it makes sense to build a neighborhood off of 200, even though our comp plan says that it shouldn't.
Right.
So.
Right. And I've from a planning perspective, I've always been a huge proponent of trying to keep Hancock County as rural as possible for as long as possible. And at the same time, we just want to grow in a sequential way, try to avoid that leapfrog development so that pristine agricultural areas can stay agricultural for a long time, but also with the understanding that the town will grow. And where is that growth going to happen? And it's funny because, God, I've been here for 6 years already, and it's come up on occasion is how big is Fortville going to be? And I always said, that's a good question. I honestly don't know the answer. We've talked about different areas, but this is really the first time that I think we put pen to paper and said, well, this is kind of what we're thinking. So, yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think the notion of someday possibly annexing into the Hamilton County could be controversial, but I think there could be some benefits to a lot of folks. Is number one, first, the assessed value of a lot of those homes there would be of benefit to the town. And Fishers is not getting that because it's not in the city of Fishers. So only Hamilton County is getting it. And let's face it, right now, you just take something like police response. I mean, technically, the Hamilton County Sheriff's Department has to respond. It couldn't be any further away from Noblesville. Same thing with the Highway Department and plowing. And then even for if somebody were to make the argument and say, well, Fishers may want it. Well, that's true. But at the same time, it is still far for them too. And in terms of a potential loss of assessed value in relation to their community of 92,000 people, it's a drop in the bucket to them. So something to think about.
Well, I know the council. Making.
Right.
What I always want to see happen in the area is these farmers start selling land. At some point, sometime we get it as the home developer that wants to come in there and put in the statements and because we have great places, but I realize now the cost. And that's what I.
Well, and that's an excellent segue to the next point. So, I've thought about all of the different types of land use categories that we could have consistent with, if you go back to our original map, it's pretty basic. It just says residential, commercial, institutional, social, industrial, agricultural, PUD. What I've tried to do is break down the residential category, the commercial category into a little bit more detail that can really provide the vision to the development community as to what the town is looking for.
Is this
in a
map
little-
expected to stay the same for the new one?
What's that?
Is this zoning map expected to stay the same for the?
The zoning map would stay the same. We wouldn't change the zoning. This map would go away. And so what we would do is, the next step is, I'm going to go through these different land use categories to see what your thoughts are on
Why
how.
wouldn't we want to look at changes to what's zoned over there if we're talking about not being?
Yeah, I mean,
agricultural anymore?
it's certainly something that could be discussed. And it can happen where if you want to do a zoning to match the comp plan, there's some pros and cons to doing that because sometimes, for example, a given land use might make sense. The zoning might make sense well into the future, but it doesn't make sense now or in the next couple of years because the area is remote. But the bottom line is, I think if the plan commission and the council wanted to look into that further in terms of doing a rezone, that makes people nervous. That's the other thing too, is,
If you don't. Annexation, you don't want it.
right. Right. That's you're exactly right. That's one of the trade-offs. So, on the residential front, I've got three different, categories that I'm proposing here. The first one, is probably the smallest land use and geography that I would anticipate, but it's called residential neo-traditional. That would obviously include a lot of the Old Town area, some of the adjacent areas, and and what I would also do is include these basically these slides, attach them to the map, so that the developers have an idea as to the type of development that we're thinking about. Certainly, if there are other photos that you see that you really like, we can look at those and plop them in there as well. But what we're conveying here are really three different types of neo-traditional that would be under that umbrella. Bottom left would be an alley loaded product with a porch. Top left would be a front loaded garage door, but again with a very large porch. And then to the right, this would be a detached garage off of a cottage style home. So really those three variations within residential neo-traditional. Right. Correct. Then the next category would be residential suburban. Here's some representative photos. Things like we've seen by Ryan Homes, D.R. Horton, predominantly tract home builders. Give you an idea of that. And then the third category would be residential estate and or rural. Here's some examples from around town and the surrounding area that would go into that category. Then moving on, proposing a multifamily suburban category. This would be basically apartment complexes. It could also be attached housing. I wouldn't anticipate a lot of this around that planning area, but certainly I think it would be wise to plan where we would like to see that. This category would be this next one, multifamily and or commercial, small town urban. So this could be areas like Main Street, it could be Broadway, it could be a few other select areas, but obviously that building typology is a lot different from the other ones that you've seen. Then the second type of commercial, so 2 out of 2 commercial districts would be suburban commercial. Eventually, it could include areas where we're going to put some big box retailers. I don't think we're going to have a lot, but there'll probably be a need at some point to put a Kroger in, maybe an Aldi, Chick-fil-A somewhere. Even the upper left corner, you've got an office complex. Where would those land uses go? So 3 different categories for residential, 2 for commercial. Then a basic one would be industrial. Kind of use Thursday Pools as an example, and then the Deaton's Waterfront Services, their new building out on 1000 North. Then we've got institutional, things like fire stations, schools, town hall, cemeteries, churches, things of that nature. And then lastly, parks, open space, and recreation. So the goal was to hit this fine line where we were showing enough detail on what the vision is and where these areas would be located, but not get so descriptive that the market isn't allowed to make some adjustments. So that was the thought process there. Any thoughts one way or the other on that?
Can you go over that again?
Yeah. Sorry, Ryan. Yeah. So Ryan, just to bring you up to speed. So in our existing comprehensive plan on the map, we've got some very basic categories, just residential, commercial, industrial. It's really on the residential commercial side. There's really no definition as to what type of residential are we talking about. So we want to get a little bit more descriptive. I think it would be helpful to the development community, helpful to the residents as to what type of land use patterns we see. Okay, so for residential, I had 3 categories, kind of neo-traditional development like this. And remember, all these different land uses would be found somewhere. It's not like we're picking just one. It's just where are these land uses going to be. So the second one would be suburban, like D.R. Horton, Lennar Homes, any of your suburban tract builders. And then the third one is estate and or rural category. Then there's a multifamily category of suburban, which could ultimately be projects like this. And then this is a multifamily and or commercial, small town urban. So this could be anything for the most part along Broadway, Main. It could be mixed use, of course. It could be only commercial. It could be only multifamily if it fits in a small town or urban pattern. So I tried to catch all as succinctly as possible there. Then we've got commercial suburban as a land use. Basically a lot of different chains, but bigger footprints than what you would have in the downtown area. Industrial. institutional, and then parks, open space and recreation.
So for these areas that we would define as these different residential areas, would the development standards would obviously be different between each of them. So maybe the neo-traditional requires chairback curbs and our suburban
Right.
does not. So it would,
Yeah, we could potentially tailor it to different, we'd have to adjust the zoning ordinance on some of that to make those changes if that was desired. I think there's also a possibility that different developments would come in over time via planned unit developments, and we can kind of deal with those topics as they come in. But certainly there should be a connection between what's in the comprehensive plan and what's in the zoning ordinance for what you're allowed to do.
I think we've been open to planned unit developments, that have come through. So I think this would even, maybe we have this is a neo-traditional area and they come in and still want to do a PUD, but they know that we're looking for something like this. So they come kind of already tailored to what we're looking for, depending on, maybe they're not coming. Yes,
Right.
exactly.
Just back home. Here's like this area. this
Yeah.
area over Here, that's where we see those homes. And you have commercial properties, we cover development standards, where we see them going in. So they're kind of giving something different.
And it's funny because I see this as, in a lot of ways, it's some policies may be changing a bit, but frankly, it's more about putting down on paper what the vision is and that it's all shared amongst everybody in terms of land use and what the buildings could look like. I think there's, from what I've discussions that I have had with people, is I think there's a lot of buy-in to these different areas. For example, if we talk about commercial development, I think there's a lot of buy-in that along Broadway, along Main, that's kind of more traditional development. And then we have more suburban development outside of that area, but it's not reflected in our comprehensive plan anywhere. So now's a good time to formalize that. So both us as staff, that we're on the same page as the decision makers and the public as to what's the vision for the different land uses in the surrounding area.
I think back on the existing plan, this kind of section.
Yeah, it even, and how they came up with some of that, I'm not sure. It's like a random line that goes diagonally across. So that would fix that problem as to we actually have a plan for that quadrant. Yeah.
Whichever way the growth goes first. I think the word was coming. Need to be able to have some sort of a plan, we can put a buffer in every gradual.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of where my question comes in. If we're gonna start talking about what kind of builds we're gonna use and the buffers like that, why wouldn't we talk about the zoning arrangements on this map?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly.
Because right now I'm looking at this map. And in the middle of this development that you're talking about, we want to put a big industrial streak where all that traffic coming out of those industrial parks is going to go right through town.
No, this is the old one. This, are you taking a look at
That's
this
what I'm
one?
curious about. If we're going to have a new concept plan,
Yeah,
aren't we going to have a new concept map?
yes.
And
So-
wouldn't that,
so
have-
this-
wouldn't we
this is
wanna
the old-
look at the zoning for that?
Well, what we were saying is that we certainly can. And if the plan commission and more importantly, the council, since they'll decide on it, want to go down that route, they can. Some communities do that after they adopt a new comprehensive plan map, they'll fix the zoning or fix the zoning map as well. But as Tanya was saying, is there's a trade-off to doing that is sometimes frankly, you're changing the rights that people are allowed to do with their property today. And that can be controversial sometimes. So
So, the way feelings and, you know, just they think that you're land grabbing, you're gonna come in, you're
Yeah.
gonna do something. This doesn't feel right to the, like,
Respectfully though, aren't we talking about what we want to do with it? I mean, it's not like we're trying to keep it as a secret. He's gonna write about it.
The concept, what we want to see.
Yeah.
You go- Right now. it's residential. Something they want to put some multi-family, then they have to rezone it. When the council, the planning commission, everybody gets an opportunity to see what's going on, put stipulations on it, put what they want. If you go ahead and zone it what you think it should be, then somebody may come in there with a plan that may not be exactly what you got in the concept plan, but if it's the zoning, you can't stop them. We're gonna put it in there anyway, because it meets the zoning and you can't tell them that.
Well, isn't that why we'd want to talk about what kind of zoning we'd want so that we can encourage the growth in the way that we want it, rather than just taking what we're doing, like what comes in?
Concept land. They would, what we foresee.
they won't know that it might be coming, but we're not doing anything for them now. 50 years from now, it could be out of the family when they've already. So the future zone, the future owners would know that that's what's eventually gonna happen in that. It's more of a.
Or it's ideal what we would, the community wants to see in that area. That still doesn't mean that somebody might come in with an even better idea. Okay, that's what even better we ever thought we would get. We can allow that to go in here. It may not meet the concept and land use, in the comprehensive plan, but it's better, or we can make adjustments, and we can zone the property to allow that to happen.
Isn't that what the PUDs are for?
Well, if it's already zoned, you'll need to.
I mean, so we can use the zoning to kind of set things the way we want, and if someone wants to make something different, like for a development, then they can seek a PUD, right? I just think it gives us a little more control.
well, the only other thing to remember as well is that the only thing that we'd be able to rezone at this point is anything in the red box. Because that's our actual jurisdiction. So whatever land uses we show outside of that red box, but within this black area, it's really just advisory, because until that property's annexed into the town, they can develop it up to the county, and the county does have their own comprehensive plan for that area as well. But as we've learned over the years, development will come, it will annex sequentially over time. And we want to be prepared for what that plan is, even if it does conflict with what the county's showing right now, that's okay. We want to know that if a development comes in, how is that going to mesh with what's near it in our community?
And as far as the area, like specifically what I'm talking about, if I look at this red area and the zoning that's on this growth concept map, I mean, the biggest concern I have is right here in the middle, in this longer stretch there. That's industrial zoning.
Well, that's where we're planning to put that industrial park that'll
So,
connect.
yeah, so to be clear, this map right here that we're looking at, this is the old one. This is the current one, I should say. This is the current comprehensive plan map. So basically, this would be updated for the plan.
Yeah, the plan is to bring 13 down to Fortville Pike through that area via an industrial park. Light industrial park. I know, I missed the big map. Are we getting one
I
back?
know, we need to get some.
I'm coming to the town council meeting to complain about it. No, I'm just gonna post on Facebook.
Cause I mean, my only concern with this is, like I said, looking at this, if we're gonna start updating this for how we want the town to grow, it just seems to me like, cause I'm looking at all this agricultural and I'm looking at the way agricultural is, all these farmlands are parceling off and selling to developers. I mean, Windstone is one, Mount Vernon North is another. It looks like they're trying to sell off some more land right around they owned the pharmacy over here, I think. There's some land around there they're trying to sell off, which I think is going to be a private development again. This is all, I see most of this all becoming residential. And it seems strange to me to have a residential donut around industrial land, that we're going to have traffic from that industrial going, you know.
Well, again, maybe I haven't expressed it clearly, but this map would be completely superseded. This would go away. So anything that you see on this map right here, this is all subject to change. This is what we'd like to update.
Okay, so when do we make that? That's the part I'm looking at is.
Right. So we have
the first map. This is the first sheet on the paper you gave us. So this
Right.
is the first thing I'm looking at changing or wanting to change. That's where my question.
Right. Yes, this is what we're changing. So yeah, to answer your question about the agricultural, that's a good point that you raised. You'll notice that I didn't put that in as a category. And the thought process was maybe maybe it's something we need to look at and change, but is if we're looking at this entire area bounded by this black line, that this is going to be Fortville at build out, then, and we're talking about future town limits, then really the agricultural land would all be unincorporated, would be outside of that limit at build out. Now, if there could be a change in thought, you may say, well, that might be a little too aggressive. Maybe we need to have, it's okay to have some agricultural lands within the town limits or within that black line.
Just know it'll always be there until it wants to change.
Yeah.
So
And that was,
even if you don't have it in the concept plan, have it out there, it's always gonna be there.
that was kind of my thought. Yeah. My thought process too on that.
And as a small town, it's a bunch of burgeoning community, other burgeoning communities, us too. Agricultural land doesn't benefit us as well as all these other land uses, so we would want to promote the use of those land, best use for us and for everyone else.
Yeah.
I can only imagine the pitchforks. Well, I mean, it's good. I think it's good to hear from. Well, it'd be good to hear.
That's why I said I would stay at
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for those who can afford it. I would love one. Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a great point. I think along those lines, the idea could be that as you're going from the outside to the inner core of the community, you're basically gaining in density. So you've got agriculture on the outside, then it moves into kind of rural estate residential, then suburban residential, and then urban old town neo-traditional.
This is the tip, you see in the dark blue right there, that's all this area. So right here is Broadway, 67, the library system. So they're getting ready to redo all this. This is the South Madison Street project we keep talking about. Part of this Broadway project is going to include the trail down to the 200, and they're also putting a traffic light. This shows a roundabout. There is traffic from either. The county and the state is looking to put interchange in Key West. So that's going to run a lot of major traffic up through here. we're hoping that we can kind of get away from the school, maybe come in a different route. But yeah, this is gonna still go straight up 13, all the way to 16. So it'll be kind of another north-south that's gonna get people off Fortville Pike, off this, bad little section over here, where we don't want to make it. So, yeah, this was actually, we've had several studies and plans done on this area, feasibility and everything, for this to be more of a business park, light industrial type area, even though this down here, I think is CN, this triangle down here, this could be multifamily version of that CN. CN, like you see a lot of it going back to residential.
But I mean, is industrial and stuff like that what we're hoping for with Fortville? I mean-
Small, it's kind of like our industrial park we got over here, very small, you know, niche kind of thing. We don't want, we don't want the big box stores, but we want to keep our identity small town. And, you know, you want to diversify, have some small retail, small business, small.
Right, but I mean, as far as like what we're talking about with homes and stuff, the small industrial park right here with the pool facility. I mean, that's really, I mean, that rubs all the people in Winstone the wrong way, the way they're built now. I mean, I can't see that building more light industrial down this way is gonna sit well with people who want to be in a small town feel anyway.
Well, right now, there's not a lot of homes down there.
But we don't expect there to be more. I mean, everybody's selling out these lands
You know,
and
it's interesting the way you mentioned that, because I was thinking something the other day. Picture. They feel. They built right. But they're there now, sewer plant's there, they're willing to build next to it, it's already there. If we would go in and try to build a sewer plant or add onto it after the fact, then that's when they, you know, yell and foul. If they knew it was there when they did.
And yeah, like you were saying, you said at 200, they're doing, I know in the comp plan, eventually for the county, they're gonna put an interchange at 70 at 200, right? And then, you know, we can't have truck traffic going, you know, trying to make that turn by the donut Sunrise, like it's already a miserable intersection, so yeah, and light industry, I don't know if do most communities have, I guess, a like heavy industry versus lighter industry, or I guess are our standards just only allow light industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. I had contemplated that too. For the zoning, we've got two different categories. The county has two. Other places I've worked have had two, where there's basically a lighter industrial and a heavier industrial. I think my thought process for at this point, just doing industrial is because for a couple things, if we were to make a distinction between light and heavy at this point, I think people might get pretty upset thinking, what, you're going to have smokestacks.
What is the
That-
difference?
What, well, and that's the thing, that's a great
Typically.
question, is
Where's the line?
industrial today is really, it all looks kind of similar. It's just a difference in terms of the size in a lot of ways, whether we're talking these custom manufacturing plants like we have now, or are we talking a big distribution center? Now, that being said, there's still stuff out there that can be heavy industry, whether that's like the concrete mixing plant, the other heavier uses that basically can cause more noise, more
The
odor,
type of trucks coming in and out.
the type of
or-
trucks
yeah.
coming in and out. So,
Right. Yeah.
but that's a discussion worth having, is if in the comprehensive plan, do we want to make that distinction? We certainly could.
Personally, I would say we don't include it, we don't have it. Something to consider, and air quality and all the different things that it can do. A variance and get a zone.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking too.
One or deep. So that's kind of a blessing. Or we can move it on. Part of that was to change that zoning. That zoning right there could really be bad. Almost any kind of manufacturing. A nasty sort could, and that's why you don't want to put the zoning on the property.
There's a huge light district, 6 to 10,000 square feet for small business. That's really hard.
But is that what we want for Fortville?
Sure. Yeah, we want small business here. Yeah.
You want me just a bit?
Yeah.
And move their business out here on South.
Well, and then, yeah, the business will bring additional development to, you know, like, yeah, I would love to work in Fortville. You know, I can't go and have coffee in town because they don't open before I have to be already on my way. Of course, Scooters is gonna be open, so I might stop in there.
If you work on the industrial, they're trying to reach it. Before your rental properties and bonds are 2%. Everybody, your homes are 1% per capita. And then if you have homestead and all this other stuff, mortgage exemption, all that. There's a couple of them.
And you that it's created from common all over the town. It's divided state for it here, so this is like these that are. We've got places with that, and they don't want to go outside of the area here and there. You know, they're looking at putting it here, yeah.
Let's see, Ryan, did you have any questions or concerns, things that we should? Good
No,
for
not
now.
off the top of my head right now.
Okay. And then Libby, did you have anything?
I don't. It's really hard to hear what everybody else is talking about. So
Yeah.
everybody needs to get a microphone. Go up to the microphone. I could tell I could hear Joe and Tanya, and that's it, but not all the time. So
That's all that's here.
Oh,
oh, you two should have gotten up to the microphone, dang it. I just think that, I mean, I like it. It's fine. I would like to encourage like a higher tax bracket that comes in, and I think that's the industrial side, right? I mean, I don't want to turn into McCordsville. Let them have the big box businesses, but I like. Yeah, I can't hear you. I can't laugh.
Mitchell from the paper is here.
Oh, hey, Mitchell. I saw him this morning.
We love
Off-
McCord.
Off the record, Mitchell. Yeah. Anyway, that was my only thought. So I think it's fine.
Mhm.
We're gonna have a lot of.
Yeah.
For that.
I mean, Ingles will eventually be a lot of commercial too, also, won't they?
It's not.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So then why wouldn't we want to be the small area with more homes than, but right in the middle of it? That's like, that's the part that on this map is right in the middle of it. Like it is right in the middle of it.
Yeah, there'd be a nice.
Police department. So that business to help offset some of that tax. It's hard to provide this service. So the residential people can enjoy those services more with the commercial and industrial.
Michael, did you have any comments from the development community by chance on what the discussion is? Any comments? Maybe he zoned out.
We bored him to sleep.
Yeah.
What's the time frame of doing all like?
Well,
trying to change all this and-
yeah, so I would say the next step would be if as a committee, we're in agreement, you're in agreement with what you've got, what we're showing here. Then the next step is I would take the parcel maps from the 3 different areas, put them together, and then start putting these land uses on these particular parcels. And then we can look at parcel by parcel and areas of the town, corridors of the town, see if that makes sense or not. I think it'd be helpful also to obviously the public first and foremost, see what they think. And then also some people that are in real estate, that are in commercial real estate, residential real estate, see what they think from their perspective as well. Probably also would show the floodplain boundaries on here as well, just for reference, because that's a huge factor in terms of what property is developable or not. And that can always have an impact on land use. So I think that's what I'd like to do next. And it'd probably be too quick to get it to the Plan Commission this month. Yeah.
Visual is always better for me.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They did at the Hancock County, like last year sometime, they did like a regional planning meeting at the school and they had big maps printed out at each table, and then you just were at a little round table and got to mark on the map where you thought things should go and things like
Yeah.
that.
Maybe that's the next step then, is now that we've got this together, is we just take it out to the public and say, hey, here's where would you, and it doesn't have to be specific on each
Mhm.
parcel, but in areas of town, where do you want to see these types of things? Yeah, I mean, I'd love to do that too at some point. And I think our town.
Can we
Yeah,
make it out of Legos?
Yeah.
No, ginger
and just
pieces
do
is
it.
the kids that
Oh,
farm
yeah.
on each-
I think we could certainly show more detail. We're a smaller town. But I think it's important to move through the process, kind of building up detail. Let's put it
Mhm.
that way. So right now we're starting large, and then we'll narrow it down.
And I'm gonna ask one more question before we go on. You're talking about if we have residential versus industrial, we're gonna lose some of the tax base to homestead exemptions and stuff like that. But if we have industrial, aren't we gonna attract that business with tax abatements?
Possibly.
Only if it's worth doing that.
We just gave an abatement to Ridgeview West, didn't we? Are they bringing jobs?
Yeah, they're like, I don't know, a list of a couple different requirements, I think. To allow an abatement to be given. I don't remember what those are, but. Yeah, but we'll get more into detail about each of these, like where things are going next time.
Yeah, I kind of like that idea where we'd have we'd have stickers for each of these types of categories, and then people can put it on the map as to where they generally like to see these things. Yeah.
Start in on that, and now the people will do it.
Yeah. Okay.
Another question I have here we're talking about the different types that we have going in and stuff like that. Is there a way that we are able to influence like what sections of the town will be interested in first? Because you keep mentioning the sewer plant. I've heard a couple other people mention the sewer plant when I'm at, restaurants. We always have to talk about, is there enough water, whatever that is. But all of this area out here is, I mean, that's not in any of our infrastructure, right? water, sewer
It's
stuff.
in our sewer territory.
It's a, but do we have pipes?
We don't have anything out there.
So if somebody
That's
came,
supervised.
if somebody came and developed in this very southwest corner before they developed in, say, anything along the western side, the town would be on the hook to run sewer all the way out to that southwest.
No.
We're not on the, I mean, just like Mount Vernon, Fortville, had water sewer. They chose to go ahead and build out there. And then the utilities end up going, building a whole subdivision. It's more cost effective to be putting smaller lots and put more homes. So then we want to run the super hard. Because if you don't, you have a huge lot, by least an acre.
And that's usually the limiting factor where developers are looking. If there's no water and sewer service or if it's really far, then they're not gonna do it. And like at the DR Horton neighborhood, I know they put in a lift station. And that helps the town couldn't service that neighborhood unless they were pumping stuff to them. And
Did we
that was
give any, did we give any financial assistance as a town to help with any of that?
I'm sorry,
For the lift station and other stuff like that? Do we use bonds or anything else like that to help cover those expenses and encourage the growth?
Say for instance, what we did up here. They had put in the lift station to cover there. We asked them to help stop it because we knew, I mean, there's lift stations everywhere. So by putting in a larger regional lift station, it's a larger fourth main, that allows the development to the east and tying up that lift station. Allow some of the other parcels out there to tie into that. So what we do is we give them credit on the upside. So the bigger wet well, the bigger pumps and the bigger fourth main, we give them credits on connection fees that they spend on pay. So it was maybe 100 connection fees that they didn't have to pay for the 100 lots, and then we started doing it for them.
So who covered that cost?
They covered the cost. We paid no money. We just did not pull up those connection fees until that.
And I don't know if Adam mentioned that our towns, to some of our ordinances or code or something, reduce that risk of leapfrogging against just that developers usually don't do that because it's too or discourage.
Yeah, I'd say to Jason's point, what we could do, and this might be a way of helping the public understand the timeline for some of this, is maybe we do, and this was talked about in the original plan, actually, and it got superseded in the 2016 version, but in 14, they did like a phase 1 and phase 2. Basically showing not a growth boundary per se, because you could still go beyond it. But the idea was these areas could be developed in the next 1 to 5 years, and then the rest could be, 5 to 20 years out. And I think that might make sense in this particular circumstance to do that.
Oh, yeah.
So that we're conveying that we're showing graphically how we want to grow outward, avoid leapfrogging, and then also show property owners and the rest of the public that if your area is rural, it doesn't mean that just because it's shown on our plan that it's going to turn into a subdivision in the next year or so. So that might be a way of tackling that problem.
So, I think I'm good with moving forward. With the proposed plan map and the proposed land use categories.
Is there any other?
Yep. Mhm. Mhm.
where do we see the commercial suburban proposed land use even going in our town? Where would we see a box store?
Well, that's what we gotta figure out. I think, you're gonna help decide.
Well,
I mean,
and that's the thing too, this is, when I joined the planning commission, it was straight up because, the people that I see in town, the people I talk to in town, it's like, nobody ever wants those here. Like that's, again, that's where my primary concern comes with the industrial side to this is the people I've talked to they haven't really wanted that. So like, I understand, I'm only one man on this. Don't get me wrong. That's the kind of people I'm trying to look out for because I know, but well, and that's, well, see, my temporal scale is off on that. Like that's my issue is sometimes the scale of time, but I could see the potential of one wanting to come in if 36 keeps developing as a corridor, just because it would be equidistant now between the McCordsville spread and then the Ingalls spread and stuff like that. Yeah.
if anything, I'd say that kind of the southwest.
Like I
portion.
agree with you. I don't necessarily think somebody would like a Target would want to come in and build in Fortville, but I could see them saying this spot right here is convenient along the corridor. And that's where we could end up with those. And do we want one of those? Like I think that's the question I have is what kind of town do we want to be? Do we want to be a kitschy little town with like our main street and maybe some, like if we were going to do like the apartments that are listed in here, like, do we want to do a little more along the lines of what Ridgeview West is doing, where the apartments are above and there's some commercial space down below that they're using, only in this case, maybe we offer it to other people. But do we want to be a town with industrial in it or not? And that's the part that, like I said, I'm one man trying to figure this out. I just know that the people that I talk to, like the town, a little more residential than anything beyond that. So that's where my concerns come in on this.
I think though too, like thinking about like this small community and being somewhere that you can work and go to a cool restaurant. And like if I worked in the industrial park, I could ride my bike to work. Like I have to ride my bike all the way down Fall Creek, 20 miles, like things like that, like living and being able to do all of those things in a small community, which, just being less having to drive all the way, I don't want a big Kroger necessarily in Fortville, but it'd be kind of nice not have to drive 20 minutes to go to Meijer or go to Kroger or something like that, to be just like a little self-sufficient community that has a little bit of everything. Would be cool from my perspective.
Everything you need right there. Communication.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I think that makes a better, I think, healthier communities if they have all of that in one spot versus kind of a bedroom community sometimes.
I don't think you want that.
Doesn't feel that big.
But I think it's good to think about all the different, like you said, I'm just one person too that feels this way, but there are a lot of people that feel differently, and that's why we'll get them involved too.
I remember years ago, they wanted to put a fence up around the town and certain buildings, keep it all small. If that was the case, then nobody's utility building. Because you're gonna be able to probably offer. They use it, but it's all up. It goes the same with your other services. The more you can spread it. Everybody, you should talk to them.
We do.
That's good for the planning unit there. Yeah.
All right.
Cool. So do we
Any
have to like vote on anything or?
No,
Okay.
not really. I think we've got some clear direction in terms of how we'd like to.
Oh,
Is that page 2?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thought it was okay.
very detailed notes on that part. I can tell you all about it. That fell off at the end. Sorry. Adam said this.
You can go back and watch the YouTube.
Yeah.
Basically over to where it's not just a- now. This is about it. It is to ver- that version. So there's an unincorporated calls that a lot. But they would be serviced better by Fortville because of the
That's right.
proximity to Fortville.
Which neighborhood is that?
A Vermillion,
But we are not forcing anyone.
but we're not forcing.
I think it'll just be more, more clear.
Trying to put together to accomplish what we want. Right.
Sure, a lot's changed though since 2016 or
Yeah.
14 or whenever, yeah.
For sure.
And I still have a question, because this one came up when they were looking at, what was that last housing addition off 200 that they wanted to put in?
Oh, the
Why on this red border around here, which is our town incorporated limit, right? Why are there two tiny squares down here?
Because we don't force that.
Okay. Hmm. Interesting.
So
Yeah,
can
it would
they
be
get
nice to.
serviced by the town?
And we get the same.
Yeah. I would probably change their mind. I want to live out in the country, but I want water and sewer. Yeah. Yeah, I'm good with
So
it.
they get our services and everything like that, but they're not in town.
Yeah, we definitely, we absolutely try to avoid providing water and sewer to unincorporated areas. That's, and it is, and there's also there's no legal requirement for us to do that either. And that is our biggest enticement for development to come into the town limits is water and sewer. And I think that'll always be, whether it's Fortville or any municipality, frankly, it's the same situation. All right, well, any other
I'm good.
questions, comments? Okay. Well, thanks for your feedback and good discussion, and we'll keep working on it.
Do we need a motion for adjourn?
I might as well.
Motion to adjourn?
A second.
One second. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I forgot a meeting. I got my computer away, so I'm not.
All in favor? Aye.
All right.
Adjourned 7:49 PM.
Thank you all.
Anybody see this thing, Jen? Social media. So get home and see on the Fortville page and on the Windstone page about all the parents.